Hi, welcome to another edition of This Issue. Our topic this time is the militarization of our schools. And I have four guests. First, I'll start here on my left. This is Lisa Tessler from Topsom, and then Joe Conroy and Mary Murphy from Woolwich, and then Rosalie Tyler Paul from Georgetown. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Why don't we each start by making a quick opening statement, each of you expressing your concerns about the military presence in the local schools. Joe, we'll begin with you.
Well, Bruce, 2 years ago when my son was in 7th grade, we learned that the National Guard was presenting its adventure program when the school newsletter came out announcing that the National Guard had invaded the 7th grade. When I questioned my son about it, he said, yes, soldiers in uniform had been coming into the classroom presenting information much like Project DARE, where they were teaching the kids to make good decisions about drugs, alcohol, and oddly enough, violence. So when I expressed my concerns to school administrators, they seemed completely uncomprehending that anyone would question soldiers in uniform coming into the classroom. And since then, we've managed to get the Commissioner of Education to tell schools that they need to notify parents beforehand.
This is the state commissioner, you mean?
Yes, the State Commissioner of Education, and give parents a chance to opt out.
How about you, Mary?
Well, not only were we horrified to learn about the classroom program with uniformed soldiers presenting curriculum that has nothing to do with their military training to middle school students, but at the end of this, it's called the Adventure Program. It's a Maine National Guard program that we found out about in Woolwich 2 years ago. And at the end of the program, they take the children on an overnight field trip to a place called Bogbrook, which the school always refers to only as Bogbrook, as if it's some sort of nature preserve, when it's actually, we learned, a National Guard training facility in western Maine. And the activities at that overnight field trip involve more uniformed soldiers in combat fatigues, teaching kids rope climbing, leading them in activities like rappelling over walls, all of which struck us as being a little too evocative of boot camp. But again, it's supposed to be part of this team-building drug demand reduction program.
And are these these National Guard soldiers, are they certified teachers?
No, they are not. In the Adventure Program, they've actually sent some National Guardsmen to receive training from more legitimate nonprofits that do sort of outdoor adventure education, including a national nonprofit called Project Adventure. And there was a lot of confusion about whether this was Project Adventure. I emailed Project Adventure, who made very clear that even though some of these soldiers had participated in their training, that this is a completely separate program, and they would certainly not have uniformed soldiers presenting it. And the ropes courses that they take the kids to at the military training facility is nothing to do with these more legitimate programs.
And now, Joe and Mary, you have a second child now at the age where where they're being affected by these programs, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. Lisa, you live in Topsom,
That's
and tell
correct.
us about what's happening there.
Well, I'm here today in part as a concerned parent of a 5th grader who will be entering into middle school next year. I just recently learned through a friend of mine who wrote to the Times Record about this issue that there's a Stay on Track program that is offered to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students in the middle school. That is a substance abuse prevention curriculum delivered by armed military personnel, National Guard personnel, and that is backed by NASCAR. And I was quite shocked to learn this. It was something that, as a parent of an upcoming middle schooler, I had never really been consulted about or brought into any kind of discussion. And I understand that there is an opt-out provision should parents feel that they don't wish for their children to undergo this curriculum, which obviously is problematic because the last thing you want is for your child to feel that they're different from their peers and not joining them for what I'm sure is valuable information on the one hand. Where I have concern is I think the content of this curriculum is not something that I'm questioning, but it's the delivery, it's the branding, to have armed personnel basically in an authoritarian type of position delivering this to our children.
Do you mean uniform personnel?
Uniform personnel, delivering this to our children, people who don't have any kind of ongoing relationship with the children after they finish the program. And whereas we have trained health education professionals in the system, my concern is, why aren't they the authorities? They are trained, they are certified, as opposed to these other people from the outside.
And when you opt out, when you say, I don't want my child to participate
Right.
in this, stay on track, what does the school do with the child during that period of time?
Since we're still in the 5th grade, I don't know all the details about this, but my understanding is that there's just been a few number of children who've opted out or whose parents have chosen for them to opt out. And I believe that they've gone to the library for some quiet reading time. But I think what's unfortunate is that they're not receiving the information in that alternate space. And my hope would be that there would be something more highly structured available to them.
Well, I want to read to you from a news release just put out by the Army National Guard about this program that you're talking about that now
Stay
is
on
in
track.
Topsom, Stay on Track. And here they quote Lieutenant General Clyde Vaughn, Director of the Army National Guard, about this program, Stay on Track. And he says, quote, "If the strength of our recruiting is the same place that you run NASCAR, which it is, and if Dale Earnhardt Jr. is the most popular of all NASCAR drivers, which he is, then you would think that would make a difference in the number of people who will follow the Guard car, and maybe effectively think about joining our team." Of course, he's talking about the Army. And then he goes on to say, quote, "And that's all we ask him to do. Dale will have an enormous impact on that effort. People will look at the partnership this way. The Guard is a great way to serve. It's a first-class organization, and I like Dale Earnhardt Jr. So does the Guard. I'm going to have to think about that," unquote. So clearly the Army itself is saying that this Stay on Track, in their own news release, Stay on Track program is a recruiting program.
And school administrators, Bruce, have repeatedly assured us that it's not about recruiting, that the soldiers are just trying to give back to their community, that they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. But I think that that makes quite clear that it is about recruiting in a larger sense.
Rosalie, what would you say about all this? I know you've been working with the American Friends Service Committee on this larger issue of recruitment. How would you comment on all of this?
Well, the American Friends Service Committee that I volunteer with has been working at the high school level. And the No Child Left Behind Act has mandated, since 1990, since 2001, I believe, since 2001, has mandated that for public schools to get federal funding, they must give full access to the military of students and students' contact information. I think just puzzling over that tells a lot. If our government makes a law that all schools must let students be fair game to the military, I don't think there's much mystery there. It's very troubling. And the recruiters, who have about $16,000 of budget per recruit, have quotas to meet every month. And if they don't meet them, then they lose their job. They maybe get sent into the war zone themselves. They're very hungry for recruits. So at the high school level, we've been very concerned that all students get the whole picture before they make that huge decision whether or not to join the armed services. When we found out that the middle schools have now hired, so to speak, the National Guard to come in and do a health or drug reduction curriculum, it certainly followed that this was enticing and glamorizing and normalizing the military for much younger students. And it certainly seems connected to the issue of recruitment. If we're going to have endless war with an axis of evil, then 5 years is a very short time in which to prepare younger people for that 18-year-old moment of joining up. So we're very much concerned and very grateful to these parents for stepping up and speaking to their schools and to other parents.
If I can just interject, Rosalie, you mentioned that they were hired. My sense is that they're offering this free of charge.
They are.
And I am, as an educational administrator myself, I'm very sympathetic to some of the constraints and the stresses that school boards and superintendents and principals are feeling with the budget cuts. And what's hard and probably tempting is when someone like the National Guard comes forward and says, we'll do this for you for free. But nothing is really for free. And there's a price that we pay. And I'm also aware, because I work in higher education, that probably the military, like college admissions officers, are concerned with the change in the demographic 4 to 5 years from now, where there will be fewer 18-year-olds available to enter our nation's colleges and universities, and similarly to enter into the armed forces. They must be very aware of that. And I don't know for certain whether they view this as part of their recruitment strategy, but there's no question in my mind that providing someone of authority for students to look up to and to want to emulate in some way can be very palpable for young people when they're at such an impressionable age. And that concerns me a great deal.
Let me read something that I just got a couple days ago. A report saying that the United States is violating an international protocol that forbids the recruitment of children under the age of 18 for military service. This is according to a new report recently released, charging that the recruitment practices are now of the United States military are now targeting children as young as 11 years old. This 46-page report, called Soldiers of Misfortune, was prepared by the American Civil Liberties Union for submission to the UN Committee on the Rights of Children. The report says, quote, the United States military's procedures for recruiting students plainly violate internationally accepted standards and fail to protect youth from abusive and aggressive recruitment tactics. This increased aggressiveness of the military recruiters is due in large part, as you said, Rosie, to the growing pressures to meet the demand of U.S. endless war in Iraq, Afghanistan, possibly Iran now, and other places. Mary, let me ask you this question. How many middle schools in Maine today are offering these so-called adventure programs where they take the kids out to these mini boot camps? Do you know?
Approximately 40 middle schools in the state, which is a minority of middle schools in the state, participate in the Maine National Guard Adventure Program. We were particularly dismayed to learn that Woolwich is currently the only one doing the overnight field trip at the end. Most of the schools just do a day trip. But this is a good opportunity to bring up how the trend seems to be moving toward this nationally branded Stay on Track program, which is even more blatantly connected to recruiting.
This is the NASCAR program.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, with the adventure program that's been in place for a few years in Maine with the Maine National Guard, we still see it as part of this larger picture of militarization and eventual recruitment. But the NASCAR-themed national program that they're now, I think that Rosalie has heard from a National Guard's person that they're planning to replace the state programs like the adventure program with this national Stay on Track program, which, as the quote you read illustrated, is even more blatantly connected with advertisement for the military and recruiting. But a lot of folks ask us, how the adventure program is different from any outside organization that may come into the schools to present a curriculum or present on a topic. And we have a number of responses to that. One is, why in the world would the military be the most appropriate institution to come in and teach middle school age kids about risk-taking behavior, which again is supposed to include making choices not only against drugs and alcohol, but against violence.
And media influences.
And and Stay on Track talks a lot about media influences at the same time that they're blatantly using NASCAR advertising. Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s car has National Guard advertising all over it. And he's participating in races like with names like the Budweiser Shootout when it's supposed to be an anti-alcohol program. But back to the, we think, and also people have said, oh, well, you don't think that these wonderful particular soldiers who come into the classroom have, bad motives, and they may not. I mean, we think, the sergeant that we met, who is one of the primary presenters in Woolwich, is a good guy and probably does have good intentions, but I think people really need to look at the underlying systemic interests here. Yeah. Why is it that the National Guard has all this funding that the schools don't have to provide these programs themselves? Why is it that they're able to stretch, thinly stretched military personnel to come into the schools and do this?
Well, Joe, let me ask you this. What do you think the military stands to gain by becoming more visible in the middle schools where your kids are attending?
Well, as Lieutenant General Vaughn says in the press release that you have, the Army National Guard needs 70,000 new recruits every year. So I think what they stand to gain is pretty obvious, that by associating themselves with fun, by presenting ropes courses and in team building exercises, they plant the seeds in the minds of kids that it's a lot of fun to be in the military, and they're taking a long-term strategy, I think.
Priming the pump.
Yeah. And we feel that it's dangerous to let the military cross over that line into civilian society and start taking the roles that are meant for civilians to have. I mean, we don't want the military taking over our police force or our hospitals and running them, and by the same token, I feel it's wrong to let them start taking over the roles of teachers.
So maybe, though, you're overreacting. Let's be honest. The state government, the local government budgets are drying up. As jobs leave the country, the tax base dries up. Mm-hmm. Increasingly, they're having more and more fiscal problems. We're seeing more and more education cuts, both at local and state government. Well, at the same time, the military their budget is increasing dramatically. Mm-hmm. So what's wrong with having the military come in and take over? If they've got the resources, think of your children. Think of what the military could do with all the money they have if we just let them take over the schools. Rosie, how would you comment on that?
Well, I'm kind of chuckling over here. How come the military has all the money? That's the question I want to ask. Why is it that the schools don't have more money? Why doesn't healthcare have the money and the job training? What's the military doing with all the money, and how did that happen? So, no, I would turn your question on its head and say, clearly, we don't want the military taking over our schools, and if this is a first step in that direction, no, let's all stand up and speak against it. But let's ask the bigger question, how is it that the military is doing so well and the schools are struggling and human needs are suffering?
Mary, is there a class element to all of this? Are they targeting the working class and poor schools more than the upper income schools?
We believe there is. 2 years ago, we obtained the list of the, 37 schools at that time across the state that were participating in the National Guard Adventure Program. And noticeably absent from that list were the more, higher income, more privileged communities in Maine, many of which are still participating, in nonprofit programs that do these kind of team building activities.
So why is that happening, do you think? Why are they targeting the lower income neighborhoods, if you will?
I believe because they think there's a greater likelihood that those children will grow up to have less career options and be more likely to look at military service. And we're not saying that no one should look at military service, but we certainly think that middle school children are much too impressionable to be presented with this unrealistic, glorified image of what soldiers do. We would be much more interested in having soldiers come in and talk about the realities of their war experience or what's going on with veterans today in this country than to come in and do this thing that has nothing to do with the appropriate functions of the military.
Are organizations like Veterans for Peace, are they given equal time in the schools now, in the middle schools and the high schools? Are they given equal time to match what the National Guard and other military services are getting in the schools?
That's a great question. I don't know.
Certainly not.
I mean, have you
This
seen
level
any
of
evidence that they have?
We've been working very hard on that at the high school level and have developed some materials that are carefully about alternative choices that students could make post-secondary. So that we have now been invited into career days as the American Friends Service Committee and Veterans for Peace to come and table. And we've found our way into civil rights teams to talk with students about issues of wanting to have dialogue around controversial issues and not just listen to one voice. But I think schools are careful of their federal funding, and they don't want to rock that boat, and they're very cautious of anyone who might have a contrary view to the military coming in. So no, they don't have.
Lisa, what can be done to make sure that parents are consulted in this whole process, and to make sure that school boards are staying on top of this? Do you get a sense that parents are really in the know about this, about the whole programs that are coming down from the National Guard?
I think I'm going to find out. Again, because we're in that transition point now between 5th and 6th grade, this is coming at us sort of all new. And my sense is that most parents really haven't paid much attention to this, or aren't questioning it, perhaps, or certainly would like to know more. And there have been a few of us within our district who are taking a lead in speaking with the school administration, who I think wants to do what's best and has their hearts absolutely in the right place. And I am incredibly sympathetic to the stress they're under with the budget cutbacks, because there are so many areas in which our schools are being affected, and so they're trying to meet all the needs with very, very limited resources. And I think parents understand that too, and are sympathetic to that. And so when something is provided that's at no cost, obviously there's a temptation there. But I think what my hope is with this group of concerned parents who I've been engaged in conversation with, that we can start to build a dialogue amongst ourselves and with the school, and we're in the process of doing that right now.
Yeah. Joe, would you have a reaction to that same question about the parental involvement? What's been your experience in Woolwich?
My experience has been that most parents are unconcerned, that it doesn't seem to bother them. My feeling is that if we're really concerned about our children's ability to resist violence and other antisocial behavior, that we should look at the prominence of violence and militarism in popular culture rather than replicate the themes in the schools.
How about you, Mary? Any comment on that?
Well, on the issue of parental involvement in the decision to bring these programs into the school, our sense is that there has been very little upfront parental involvement in that decision-making process, and that even the school board, at least in Woolwich, was not familiar with the program when we brought it to their attention, that it's being decided kind of arbitrarily by school administrators. But, also to follow up on Joe's point, we just think that the military has a conflict of interest, which the schools participating are not willing to look at. And it's interesting that the contract with the schools specifies that they'll be in combat uniforms to present this curriculum. We've asked about that. They clearly, that clearly is a mandated part of the program. And it was interesting that the sergeant who presents the program, I've been told by authorities in the National Guard that, oh, that's just because this is part of their job and that's what they wear to their job. But when it was time for the parental information night about the program, which was also part of his job with the adventure program, he was in civilian clothing. But they're mandated to wear the combat uniforms in the classroom, which we just find very disturbing.
Yeah.
To me, it means that they're imprinting in the child's mind that war uniforms and the state of war, if you will, is normal. This is normal. It's part of my day-to-day life.
Exactly.
And it begins to prepare them for this militarization of our culture. Rosie, could you talk about that in a minute? Just give us your sense of that, of this question, parental involvement, and this imprinting again on the minds of the children.
Well, I think that it's so clear at the high school level that the kids are getting to be that age when there'll be a post-secondary choice, and the military is interested to have them make that decision. Even in the high schools, it's startling to have uniformed people in the classrooms, in the lunchroom, in the hallways.
Or it should be startling.
Well, it's startling to me. Yes.
Us too.
Yeah. But when it comes to the middle school students, it's really alarming that parents aren't seeing it more clearly for what it is, to my view, which means that the militarization of the culture has worked already its magic over the adult population. And we see the military as normal, or many of us see the military as normal.
Good. Rosalie, while we're at it, can you tell us if there's a parent listening to the show that might be concerned about this and they might want to get involved in some way or even ask questions of someone? Is there a way that they can contact someone?
Yeah, they can call me at home. I'm working with the American Friends Service Committee, and my phone number is, should I say my phone number now?
Yeah.
371-2077. And we are looking for parents of high schoolers who would like to help us be in touch with schools, and we've got some wonderful students working in area schools on this issue, putting new policies into place. And if a parent of a middle schooler wants to call, and I can put them in touch with the concerned parents at the middle school level.
Okay, and your number again was 371-2077.
That's right.
Well, thank you. And thank you all very much. Lisa Tessler from Topsom, Joe Conroy and Mary Murphy from Woolwich, and Rosalie Tyler Paul from Georgetown. Thank you all very much for coming on the show today. And thank you for watching another edition of This Issue. Until next time, good luck to you all, and please get organized.